Captain Jack Reed stood on the bridge of the human patrol ship Vigilant, his eyes fixed on the vast darkness of space that marked the border between human territory and the worlds of the Galactic Council. His ship was not large by military standards, just 200 meters long with a crew of 120, but it represented the edge of humanity's reach into the stars. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lisa, the communications officer. Her fingers moved quickly over the glowing control panel. "It's coming through on an old emergency channel." Reed walked over to her station. He was tall, even, for a human, with broad shoulders and a stern face marked by a scar running along his left cheek. "Show me." The screen filled with a pattern of pulses. Reed recognized it immediately. An SOS signal, one of the oldest human distress calls, now, adopted by many council species. "Where is it coming from?" he asked. "Epsilon Eridani, sir, the Lorian homeworld." Reed's expression darkened. The Lorians were one of the peaceful species that made up the Galactic Council. They had evolved on a world with gentle gravity, mild weather, and few natural dangers. Like most council races, they viewed humans with a mixture of fear and distrust. "That's 15 light years into council space," said Will, the navigation officer. "We can't go there without permission." Reed knew Will was right. For the past century, humanity had lived under strict rules set by the Galactic Council. Human ships were forbidden from entering council space without direct approval. Humans were classified as Deathworlders, a species evolved on a planet so dangerous that it produced naturally aggressive and physically powerful beings. Earth's heavy gravity, violent weather, and deadly wildlife had shaped humans into something the rest of the galaxy found frightening. "Get Ambassador Trill up here," Reed ordered. Minutes later, the ship's resident council representative arrived on the bridge. Ambassador Trill belonged to a species called the Venlil. She stood just over 5 feet tall, with a slender body, large eyes and skin that seemed almost translucent under the ship's lights. On her home planet, the gravity was only 0.7 of Earth's, and there were no large predators. "Captain Reed," she said with a slight bow. "You requested my presence?" Reed pointed to the communication display. "We've picked up an SOS signal from Epsilon Eridani, the Lorian homeworld." Trill's large eyes widened. "That's unusual. The Lorians are a peaceful species with no natural enemies." "That's what worries me," said Reed. "This isn't just any distress call, it's using an old human emergency pattern, but it's being broadcast on a council frequency." Trill studied the signal for a moment. "Council protocols are clear, Captain. We must report this to Central Command and wait for instructions." Reed nodded slowly. "Of course, Ambassador. We'll send a message to Central Command. Include all data on the signal." "Yes, sir," Will replied, already typing the message. But as Trill turned to leave, Reed caught the eye of his second-in-command, Major Kate Lewis. The slight nod they exchanged went unnoticed by the ambassador. Later, in his private quarters, Reed activated a secure communication line to Earth. This connection bypassed the standard channels that the Council monitored. It was technically a violation of his agreement with Ambassador Trill, but Reed had learned long ago that following all the rules could get people killed. The screen lit up to show the face of Admiral James Wilson, head of Earth's Defense Command. "Jack," Wilson greeted him. "This is unexpected. Sir, we've picked up something that doesn't feel right," Reed said, and explained about the distress signal. Wilson's face remained neutral, but his eyes showed concern. "The timing is troubling. We've had 3 border stations go dark in the past week. No distress calls, just silence." "The Vex?" Reed asked. The Vex Collective had appeared at the edge of known space 2 years ago. Little was known about them except that they were expansionist and avoided direct contact with humans. "Possibly," Wilson admitted. "Our scouts report increased Vex ship movements near the outer colonies." Reed leaned closer to the screen. "Sir, request permission to investigate the Epsilon Eridani signal." Wilson shook his head. "Denied, Captain. You know the rules. We can't send a military vessel into Council space without authorization." "With respect, sir, by the time the Council makes a decision, it could be too late." "I understand your concern, Jack, but my hands are tied. Continue." Your patrol and wait for the Council's response. Wilson paused. However, I am sending the Dauntless to reinforce your position. Captain Mitchell and his crew should reach you within 48 hours. Reed understood the unspoken message. The Dauntless was a heavy cruiser, much larger than the Vigilant and armed. For serious combat, Wilson was preparing for trouble. Yes, sir, we'll maintain position. After ending the call, Reed sat in silence for a long moment. Then he pressed another button on his console. Lewis joined me in my quarters. Major Kate Lewis arrived quickly. She was a compact woman with short, dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Zay. Admiral denied our request, Reed told her. Lewis nodded. As expected, the Council has us on a tight leash. Too tight. Something's happening at Epsilon Eridani, and we're sitting here doing nothing. Reed stood and walked to the small viewport. In his quarters, the stars looked cold and distant. The Dauntless is on its way. Captain Mitchell will be here in 2 days. Mitchell's a good officer, Lewis commented. Smart. Yes, he is. Reed turned back to her. Have Davis adjust our patrol route. I want to move closer to the Epsilon border. Lewis raised an eyebrow. How much closer? Close enough that if our sensors were to accidentally pick up more detailed information from the Lorian system, it would be our duty to investigate. A small smile appeared on Lewis's face. Understood, sir. I'll make it happen. By the next morning, the Vigilant had shifted its patrol route to the very edge of human space. From this position, their long-range sensors could reach just far enough to detect large energy signatures in the Epsilon Eridani system. Reed was eating breakfast when the alarm sounded. Captain to the bridge, came Will's voice over the intercom. Emergency! Reed ran to the bridge, passing crew members rushing to their stations. When he arrived, Will was staring at his display in shock. What is it? Reed demanded. Massive energy spikes in the Epsilon system, Will reported. Consistent with weapons fire. A lot of it. Reed looked at the main screen, which showed a visual representation of the energy readings. Can we get any visual? Too far for clear images, Lisa said from her station. But the communications network is going crazy. Multiple distress calls then. Nothing. Nothing? All Council communication channels just went silent, Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly. Not just from Epsilon Eridani, everywhere. Ambassador Trill rushed onto the bridge, her face pale. Captain, I've lost contact with Central Command. Reed met her frightened gaze. Ambassador, I believe your people are under attack. As if to confirm his words, a new message appeared on the main screen. A priority transmission from Earth Defense Command. Alert to all ships. Multiple Council worlds under attack. Unknown hostiles. Prepare for combat operations. Await further. Orders. Reed turned to his crew, his face grim but determined. Battle stations, and get me a direct line to the Dauntless. He looked back at the energy readings from the Lorian homeworld. We're about to find out what humanity's role in this galaxy really is. 3 days after the SOS signal from the Lorian homeworld, Earth Defense Command called an emergency meeting. The large underground war room in the Rocky Mountains was filled with military leaders, government officials, and scientists. Large screens covered the walls, showing maps of known space and the status of human colonies. Admiral Thomas Grant stood at the front of the room. He was an older man with gray hair and a face marked by years of tough decisions. His blue uniform was decorated with medals from his long service protecting humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, what I'm about to show you is deeply troubling. He nodded to a technician, and the main screen changed to show a blurry video. The image showed a beautiful city with tall, crystal-like buildings surrounded by purple trees. Then suddenly dark ships appeared in the sky. Beams of energy shot down and buildings exploded. People ran in panic as strange four-legged creatures dropped from the ships and began capturing the runners. This footage came from a Lorian escape pod that reached our border outpost yesterday, Grant explained. It shows the attack on their capital city. The room was silent as they watched. The attackers moved with purpose, setting up devices at key points in the city. They wore armored suits that seemed to help them move in the higher gravity of the Lorian world. Who are they? Asked President Marcus Blake. He was a tall, thin man with dark skin and a calm voice, even in crisis. We believe they are the Vex Collective, Grant answered, the same species that has been testing our borders for the past 2 years. The screen changed to show a clearer image of one of the attackers. It had a hard, shell-like body with 4 limbs and a head that seemed too small for its frame. Its eyes were compound, like an insect's. The Vex evolved on a low-gravity moon orbiting a gas giant, explained Dr. Kathy Jones, the lead xenobiologist. She pointed to the exoskeleton the creature wore. They need these mechanical suits to move effectively on most planets. Even on the Lorian world, which has only 0.8 of Earth's gravity. What about the Galactic Council? Asked General Ben Roberts. What's their response? Grant's face darkened. The Council was completely unprepared. According to our intelligence, the Vex attacked 12 Council worlds simultaneously. Their main defense fleet was destroyed in the first hour. Most Council members had minimal military forces to begin with. They've lived in peace for too long, said Roberts. They forgot what it means to fight. Ambassador Anna Williams stood up. She represented Earth in Council matters and understood the alien perspective better than most humans. The Council species evolved on worlds with few dangers. They never needed to develop the same survival instincts humans have. Their strength was in cooperation, not combat. And where has that left them? Roberts asked. The screen changed again. To show a map of Council space, red dots marked the attacked worlds. The Vex are moving methodically, Grant explained. They targeted communication centers first, then major cities. They're not destroying everything. They're capturing people and resources. President Blake leaned forward. What do they want with Council worlds? Territory, resources, maybe slaves, Dr. Jones suggested. We don't know their exact motives yet. What we do know, Grant continued, is that they've carefully avoided human-settled systems. Not a single human colony has been attacked, despite several being closer to Vex territory than the Council worlds they hit. The room was quiet as everyone considered this. They're afraid of us, Roberts finally said. Williams nodded. The Council has always feared humans. They called us Deathworlders and restricted our movements because our physical capabilities and aggressive tendencies scared them. It seems the Vex share that fear. With good reason, Grant said. He pressed a button and the screen showed a simulation comparing human strength to that of the Vex and Lorians. An average human can lift 3 times what a Vex can, even with their exoskeletons. Our bones are denser, our muscles stronger, and our reflexes faster. We evolved on a dangerous world that made us tough. Blake looked at the images of suffering Lorians again. What are our options? We've received a formal request for help, Williams said, holding up a datapad. Not from the Council itself. Their central government is in chaos. But from individual member worlds. Under galactic law, an SOS is a legal request for assistance from any capable species. Grant stepped forward. Mr. President, I recommend we deploy the fleet. The treaties, Roberts reminded them. We signed agreements limiting our military presence in Council space. Those treaties also include mutual defense clauses, Williams countered. And they're now being invoked by multiple Council worlds. President Blake stood and walked to the large window that looked out over the Rocky Mountains. Earth's beauty was also its danger. Powerful storms, shifting tectonic plates, varied predators. It had made humans adaptable and resilient. Now those same qualities were needed beyond Earth. We've always known this day might come, Blake said quietly, when the galaxy would need what humanity has to offer. He turned back to face the room. Admiral Grant, prepare the fleet. All of it. Grant's eyes widened slightly. All of it, sir? Blake nodded. Every ship we have. The ones the Council knows about and the ones they don't. For decades, humanity had officially complied with Council restrictions on military vessels. But secretly, Earth and its colonies had built additional ships, hidden in asteroid belts and remote moons. It was insurance against a day like this. It will take a week to gather the entire fleet, Grant said. You have 3 days, Blake replied. The people of those worlds don't have longer than that. As the meeting ended, Grant approached Williams. "Ambassador, we'll need someone who understands Council species and their worlds. Will you join the command staff?" Williams looked at the images of destruction still playing on the screen. "Yes, and I'll bring experts on each of the targeted worlds." Later that day at the Jupiter shipyards, the hidden fleet began to emerge. Great warships moved out from concealed docks inside the gas giant's moons. Smaller, faster attack vessels, powered-up engines that had been waiting for this moment. Supply ships loaded weapons and provisions. On the command ship Resolute, Admiral Grant stood with Captain Jack Reed, who had been brought in from the Vigilant to serve as tactical advisor. They watched as ships joined the growing fleet. 327 vessels, Grant said. "More than triple what the Council thinks we have." Reed looked at the display showing the Vex positions. "Will it be enough?" "It's not just about numbers," Grant replied. "It's about what humans can do that others can't." He handed Reed a data pad. "You'll be leading the first strike team. Your experience at the border gives you insights the rest of us lack." Reed studied the mission plan. "We're not just pushing them back from Council worlds." "No," Grant confirmed. The President was clear. "This ends with the Vex understanding exactly why the galaxy fears Deathworlders." As Reed left to prepare his team, Ambassador Trill approached Grant. The Venlil diplomat had been brought to Earth after the Vigilant returned to base. "Admiral," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I've never seen such military power." "We hoped we'd never need to reveal it," Grant answered honestly. "The Council was wrong about humans," Trill admitted. "We saw your strength and assumed it. Made you dangerous to us. We never considered that it might one day save us." Grant looked out at the assembling fleet, ships still arriving from hidden bases across the solar system. "Ambassador, humans don't fight because we love violence. We fight because our world taught us that survival sometimes requires it." He turned to her. "In 3 days, the Deathworlder fleet launches, and the Vex will learn what it means to face a species that evolved to overcome." The massive human fleet gathered near Jupiter looked like a metal constellation against the gas giant's swirling clouds. Ships of all sizes formed precise formations, heavy battleships at the center, cruisers and destroyers in protective rings, and small, fast attack vessels darting between them like fish. Aboard the command ship Resolute, Lieutenant Ryan Cooper watched the final preparations from the observation deck. He was young for his position, just 28, with short brown hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. As the ship's sensor specialist, he monitored the fleet's readiness. "Impressive sight, isn't it?" said a voice behind him. Cooper turned to see Sergeant Maria Diaz, leader of the Marine Special Forces unit assigned to the Resolute. She was of medium height with strong shoulders and a confident stance that came from years of training. 300 ships, Cooper replied. "More than I knew we had," Diaz nodded. "The Council limited us to 100, but humans have never been good at following rules that might get us killed." Cooper looked back at the fleet. "Do you think it will be enough? We don't know much about the Vex weapons or tactics." "It's not just about the ships," Diaz said. "It's about who's inside them." She held up her hand and made a fist. "The Vex evolved on a low-gravity moon. Even with their mechanical help, they can't match human strength or endurance." The ship's announcement system interrupted them. "All senior officers report to the main briefing room. Repeat, all senior officers to the main briefing room." In the briefing room, Admiral Grant stood before a large holographic display showing the Epsilon Eridani system. Captain Reed was beside him, along with President Blake, who had insisted on joining the mission despite security concerns. "The plan is set," Grant announced to the assembled officers. "We'll jump to Epsilon Eridani in 3 waves. First wave will be stealth vessels led by Captain Reed. They'll gather intel on Vex positions and defenses." Reed stepped forward. "My team will identify key targets and weak points. We expect the Vex have established ground bases and orbital defenses. Second wave will be our main battle group," Grant continued. "We'll engage their fleet and create openings for the third wave, our ground forces." He nodded to Colonel James Wright, head of the Marine divisions. Wright was a barrel-chested man with a shaved head and 30 years of combat experience. My teams will drop to the surface in pods designed to look like debris from the space battle. The Vex won't see us coming until we're on the ground. Sergeant Diaz raised her hand. Sir, what do we know about conditions on the planet? Good question, Wright replied. Epsilon Eridani is a larger planet than the Vex homeworld, but smaller than Earth. Gravity is 0.8 of what we're used to. He smiled slightly. For us, that's an advantage. You'll be stronger and faster than normal. For the Vex, it's still challenging. They need exoskeletons to move effectively. Ambassador Williams stepped forward. She had worked with the Lorians for years and knew their world well. The atmosphere has more oxygen than Earth, so you'll have greater endurance. But be careful. Fires spread faster too. The Lorians evolved in forests, and their cities are built among trees. Many structures are made of materials similar to crystal or hardened resin. What about the Lorians themselves? Asked Lieutenant. Cooper Williams brought up an image of a Lorian. They were tall, slender beings with forearms and smooth, pale blue skin. Their eyes were large and set wide apart on elongated faces. They're peaceful by nature, Williams explained. They evolved with few predators and focused on cooperation rather than conflict. They're physically fragile compared to humans. Their bones are less dense, and they lack our muscle mass. Which is why they need our help, President Blake added. The Vex chose their targets carefully, species that couldn't fight back effectively. Admiral Grant checked the time. Jump preparations begin in 6 hours. Get your teams ready. As the meeting ended, Ambassador Trill approached Reed. The Venlil diplomat seemed nervous around so many humans preparing for war. Captain Reed, she said, I've been studying your battle plans. Reed looked surprised. I didn't realize you had access to them. President Blake thought it important that I understand how humans fight, Trill explained. It's unlike anything the Council has seen before. In what way? The level of coordination, the aggressive tactics, the willingness to take risks. Trill's large eyes looked troubled. The Council species prefer defensive strategies, minimal casualties, controlled responses. Your plans are bold. Reed nodded. Earth taught us that sometimes you have to be bold to survive. Storms don't respond to careful negotiations. Earthquakes don't respect defensive positions. Will it work against the Vex? Trill asked. They've never fought humans before, Reed said simply. They don't know what's coming. Across the fleet, preparations intensified. In the Resolute's cargo bay, Sergeant Diaz supervised her Marines as they checked their combat suits. Unlike the bulky exoskeletons the Vex needed, human battle armor was sleek and designed to enhance natural abilities rather than compensate for weaknesses. Remember, Diaz told her team, in Epsilon's gravity, you'll be about 20% stronger and can jump 20% higher. Adjust your movements accordingly. Private Tom Wilson, the youngest member of her squad, lifted his rifle. Sarge, I heard the Vex have never fought humans hand-to-hand. Is that true? That's what intelligence says. Diaz confirmed. They've observed us from a distance but avoided direct conflict. So they don't really know what we can do, Wilson said with a slight smile. And we're going to keep it that way until the last possible moment, Diaz replied. Element of surprise is part of the plan. On the bridge, Lieutenant Cooper worked with the sensor team to calibrate their equipment for the jump. Space travel between systems used controlled wormholes, brief tiers in spacetime that allowed ships to cross vast distances. The technology was precise, but required careful calculations. All ships reporting ready, sir, Cooper informed Admiral. Grant nodded and opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Admiral Grant. In 1 hour we jump to Epsilon Eridani. For most of you, this will be your first combat against a non-human enemy. Remember your training. Trust your abilities, and watch out for each other. He paused, looking at the year, star map showing the Vex-occupied worlds. The Galactic Council has long feared what humans might do if unleashed. Today, that fear works in our favor. The Vex attacked peaceful worlds because they thought them defenseless. They deliberately avoided human territories. His voice hardened. They're about to learn why. Throughout the fleet, Humans performed final equipment checks. Pilots ran system, diagnostics on fighters. Marines secured weapons and supplies. Medical teams prepared for casualties. Ambassador Trill watched it all with a mix of hope and concern. "Your people move with such purpose," she said to President Blake. "Humans are at our best when facing a challenge," Blake replied. "For centuries, the Council saw our adaptations to Earth as something dangerous. Today, those same adaptations may save Council worlds." "And after?" Trill asked. "If you succeed, the balance of power in the galaxy will change. Many Council members will fear human military strength even more." Blake considered this. "Then we'll have to show them that strength can protect as well as threaten." The countdown to jump reached its final minutes. On every ship, crews secured for transit. The wormhole generators powered up, creating a visible distortion in space ahead of the fleet. Cooper watched his sensors as the first stealth ships disappeared into the distortion. "First wave away," he reported. "No detection by Vex monitoring stations." Admiral Grant nodded. "Second wave, prepare for jump." As the main battle group moved toward the wormhole, Grant turned to Reed. "The Vex think they attacked helpless worlds. Instead, they triggered a response from the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Reed smiled grimly. "As we say on Earth." They poked the bear. The Resolute entered the wormhole, followed by dozens of warships. In moments, the Deathworlder fleet would arrive at Epsilon Eridani, bringing with them the full force of humanity's evolutionary advantages. The counterattack had begun. The human fleet exited the wormhole at the edge of the Epsilon Eridani system. The sudden appearance of hundreds of warships sent ripples of energy across space. But by then, it was too late for the Vex to prepare. From the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Grant watched as the sensor displays filled with data. The stealth ships that had jumped ahead were already sending back information about enemy positions. Vex fleet consists of 37 major vessels and approximately 80 smaller craft, reported Lieutenant Cooper. They're scattered through the system, with the heaviest concentration around the Lorian homeworld. The main view screen showed the Lorian planet, a blue-green world with 3 small moons. Vex ships orbited it like predators, their dark, organic-looking hulls standing out against the planet's bright colors. "They weren't expecting company," Captain Reed observed. "Their ships are in standard patrol formation, not battle-ready." Admiral Grant nodded. "That's our first advantage. Status of ground forces?" Colonel Wright stepped forward. "Marine drop pods are loaded and ready, sir. Sergeant Diaz's Special Forces team will go in first to secure a landing zone." "Very well." Grant opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Grant. Execute attack pattern Thunderstorm." The human fleet broke from its tight formation, separating into smaller, faster-moving groups. This was a tactic developed from Earth's violent weather systems. Unpredictable, multi-directional, and overwhelming. In the Vex command ship, alarms blared as sensors detected the human fleet. The Vex commander, a high-ranking officer named Kraz, stared at the display in shock. His hard exoskeleton clicked as he turned to his subordinates. "Humans? Here?" His compound eyes flickered with confusion. "How did they reach us so quickly? Alert all ships, battle formations." But the human vessels were already moving at speeds the Vex hadn't anticipated. The Earth-evolved pilots, used to the crushing gravity of their homeworld, could withstand G-forces that would kill most species. This allowed them to execute maneuvers that seemed impossible. Lieutenant Cooper watched from his sensor station as the first human fighters engaged the Vex. "Sir, our ships are moving at full combat acceleration. Vex vessels are struggling to match our turn rates." "Their pilots can't handle the G-forces," Reed explained. "Their biology isn't built for it." On the view screen, they watched as a squadron of human fighters executed a tight turn that brought them behind a Vex cruiser. The fighters released missiles that struck the larger ship's engines. The cruiser drifted, disabled but not destroyed. Admiral Grant nodded in approval. "We don't just want to blow them up. We want to show them they're outmatched." In the Resolute's launch bay, Sergeant Diaz and her Marines prepared to board their drop pods. These were small, heavily armored vessels designed to look like debris from the space battle. They would fall to the planet's surface undetected among the real wreckage. "Remember, Diaz told her team. Our mission is to secure the Central Park in the Lorien capital. That's where the Vex have their main processing center for captured Loriens. Private Wilson checked his rifle one last time. What kind of resistance should we expect, Sarge? Intelligence says about 200 Vex ground troops, all in exoskeletons, Diaz replied. Without those suits, they can barely move in this gravity. Target the joints if you can. The Marines climbed into their pods, each one designed to carry 2 soldiers. The interior was cramped, but contained everything they needed. Weapons, communications, medical supplies, and enough oxygen for 6 hours if the pod landed in water. Drop pods ready for launch, Diaz reported. Colonel Wright's voice came through the comm system. Launch sequence initiated. Good hunting, Marines. The pods shot from the Resolute like bullets from a gun, joining the debris already floating toward the planet. Vex sensors focused on the larger battle didn't notice the small objects falling through their defensive screen. In orbit, the human fleet had achieved space superiority with surprising speed. The Vex ships, while technologically advanced, couldn't match the aggressive tactics and superior pilot performance of the humans. Sir, Cooper reported, the Vex main fleet is retreating to the far side of the planet. Admiral Grant studied the tactical display. They're regrouping, trying to figure out what hit them. He turned to Captain Reed. Now, for Phase 2, prepare landing craft for the main ground force. As larger troop transports began moving toward the planet, the first Marine drop pods were entering the atmosphere. Inside her pod, Sergeant Diaz felt the heat build as they plunged through the air. The pod shook violently, but she remained calm. Earth's gravity made humans comfortable with forces that would terrify most species. 30 seconds to landing, announced the pod's computer. Diaz checked her team's positions on her helmet display. The 20 pods were on target, spread across a 5-kilometer area around the Central Park. If all went well, they would create a secure perimeter before the Vex realized they were there. The pod hit the ground hard, its shock absorbers taking most of the impact. Diaz felt the bump but was unharmed. The front panel blew off and she emerged with her rifle ready. The Lorien capital was beautiful even in its damaged state. Tall, crystal-like buildings reflected the sunlight, and purple-leaved trees grew between structures. But signs of the Vex occupation were everywhere. Destroyed areas, makeshift barriers, and strange devices attached to buildings. All teams check in, Diaz ordered through her comm. One by one, the Marine squads reported successful landings. No casualties, no detection yet. Diaz led her team toward the Central Park, moving quickly through the lighter gravity. This feels weird, Wilson whispered as he easily jumped over a fallen tree that would have required climbing on Earth. Like I'm super strong. You are super strong compared to the locals, Diaz reminded him. Remember, both Loriens and Vex evolved in lower gravity than Earth. Don't break things or people by accident. They reached the edge of the park and got their first close look at the Vex. The aliens stood about 2 meters tall in their exoskeletons, with 4 jointed limbs and dark shell-like bodies. They moved stiffly, clearly uncomfortable even with mechanical assistance. In the center of the park, hundreds of Loriens sat in groups, surrounded by energy barriers. Vex soldiers patrolled among them, scanning and sorting the captives. Diaz signaled to her team. Standard pincer movement. Teams Alpha and Bravo take the flanks. Charlie team with me up the middle on my signal. The Marines moved into position with practiced efficiency. Diaz waited until everyone was ready, then gave the order. Execute. 20 Marines attacked simultaneously from multiple directions. Their first shots targeted the power sources on the Vex exoskeletons. Several aliens immediately collapsed as their mechanical support failed. The Vex responded with energy weapons, but they were slow to aim in the unfamiliar gravity. The humans, moving faster and more confidently, quickly gained the upper hand. Diaz sprinted across the park, covering ground at a speed that seemed to surprise the Vex. She reached the control panel for the energy barriers and planted a small device on it. The barriers flickered and died. You're free, she told the stunned Loriens. We're humans, here to help. Move toward the buildings at the north end of the park. The tall, blue-skinned aliens stared at her in confusion and fear. Then one of them stepped forward, older than the others with markings that suggested authority. "The Deathworlders," he said in accented human language. "You came." Diaz nodded. "We received your SOS." The Lorian elder looked at the Marines as they efficiently secured the area. The remaining Vex were surrendering as their exoskeletons failed, under precise human fire. "The Council said your kind was dangerous," the elder observed. "They were right, but not in the way they meant." Diaz touched her comm unit. "Landing zone secure, Colonel. The main force can begin deployment." Above them, the sky filled with human transport ships. The counter-offensive had begun in earnest, and for the first time since the invasion, the Lorians dared to hope. From his command ship, now retreating to the system's edge, Vex Commander Kraz watched in disbelief as his forces were overwhelmed. How can they move like that? How can they fight like that? His second-in-command had no answer. The Vex had studied Council species for years, identifying their weaknesses. But they had avoided humans, seeing them as too unpredictable, too aggressive. Now, they understood why the galaxy feared the Deathworlders. 2 weeks after the human fleet arrived at Epsilon Eridani, the system was secure. The Vex forces had been pushed back not only from the Lorian homeworld, but from 4 other occupied Council planets as well. Reports from across Council space indicated that the Vex Collective was in full retreat, abandoning positions they had conquered just weeks earlier. Aboard the Resolute, now orbiting the Lorian capital, Admiral Grant looked out at the planet below. Human ships patrolled nearby, and shuttles moved between the surface and the fleet carrying supplies and personnel. "The Vex fleet has withdrawn beyond the outer rim," Lieutenant Cooper reported, approaching with a data tablet. "Our long-range sensors show they're regrouping near their home system." Grant nodded. "And the ground operations?" "Colonel Wright reports all major Vex ground forces have been eliminated or captured," Cooper said. "Sergeant Diaz's team is helping the Lorians rebuild their communication network." "Good." Grant turned as Captain Reed entered the bridge. "Jack, how are the preparations for the Council meeting?" "Ready, sir," Reed replied. "The representatives from 15 Council species have arrived. President Blake is waiting to begin." The Resolute had been chosen to host an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council, the first ever held on a human vessel. The ship's large conference room had been modified to accommodate the different biological needs of the various species. As Grant and Reed walked to the meeting, Reed asked, "Do you think they'll change their policies toward humans after this?" Grant's expression was thoughtful. "They've seen what we can do. The question is whether that increases their fear or their respect." The conference room was filled with aliens of many shapes and sizes when they arrived. Some were tall and slender, like the Lorians, others small and compact. Some had multiple limbs, others none at all. Their skin colors ranged from pale blue to deep purple to metallic gold. At the head of the table sat President Blake, with Ambassador Williams beside him. Ambassador Trill was there too, now serving as the acting chair of the Council after the YU previous leadership had been killed in the initial Vex attacks. "Welcome, representatives of the Galactic Council," Blake began when everyone was seated. 2 weeks ago, humanity answered a distress call from the Lorian homeworld. Today, I'm pleased to report that the Vex forces have been driven from all 5 occupied Council worlds. Murmurs spread through the room, sounds of relief, gratitude, and amazement. "The speed of your response was unexpected," said a tall, golden-skinned alien named Voth, representative of the Foul Confederation. "How did you mobilize such a large fleet so quickly?" Blake exchanged glances with Grant before answering. "To be completely honest, we had more ships than the Council knew about." This caused more murmurs, less positive this time. "You violated the treaty limits?" asked Voth, his voice sharp. "We maintained a defensive capability we deemed necessary for our security," Blake replied calmly. "Given recent events, I believe that decision was justified." Ambassador Trill raised a slender hand to quiet the room. "President Blake is correct. Had humans not maintained this fleet, many more Council worlds would now be under Vex control." A short, round alien with 6 eyes spoke next. What we witnessed was disturbing. Human combat capabilities exceed anything in our records. Your soldiers moved through gravity that crippled the Vex. Your pilots performed maneuvers that would kill most species. We evolved on a world that demanded strength and adaptability, Blake explained. Earth's higher gravity, variable climate, and natural dangers shaped humans to survive difficult conditions. Which is why the Council classified Earth as a death world, Trill added. But we failed to fully appreciate that these adaptations could be used to protect as well as threaten. The Lorian elder that Sergeant Diaz had met in the park stood up. His name was Naren, and he now represented his people at the Council. My world owes its freedom to the humans, Naren said. When the Vex came, our people had no defense. We had never needed to fight. But the humans. He looked at Blake with his large eyes. They fought for us as if we were their own people. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Voth spoke again, his tone less confrontational. What do humans want? In return for this assistance? Blake smiled slightly. We want what we've always wanted, to be treated as equals, not as dangerous animals to be contained. The treaty restrictions on human settlement and military presence were based on fear, not reality. We've analyzed the Vex attack pattern, Captain Reed added, bringing up a holographic map showing the invaded systems. They deliberately targeted worlds far from human settlements, species they knew couldn't fight back effectively. They avoided human territories entirely. They feared you, said one of the council members. With good reason, Reed replied. But that fear could have protected the council if you had allowed humans more presence in your space. Grant stepped forward. We're not asking to take over. We're offering partnership, human strength combined with council wisdom and technology. Ambassador Williams distributed data tablets to each representative. We've prepared a proposal for a new defensive agreement. It would replace the old restrictions with a cooperative security arrangement. Human ships would help patrol council space, and we would establish joint training programs for defense forces. The council members studied the proposal with various expressions of interest, concern, and thoughtfulness. This would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy, Voth observed. The balance already changed when the Vex attacked, Trill countered. We can either adapt or remain vulnerable. Naren looked up from his tablet. The Lorians support this proposal. We have seen humans in combat, and we would rather have them as protectors than face future threats alone. One by one, the other representatives voiced their positions. Most were cautiously supportive, recognizing the need for better defenses. A few expressed concerns about increased human presence in their systems. Finally, Trill called for a formal vote. Those in favor of accepting the human defensive proposal, with appropriate modifications to be negotiated in follow-up sessions? 13. Representatives raised their hands or appendages. Those opposed? Only 2 indicated opposition. The proposal is accepted in principle, Trill announced. We will begin detailed negotiations immediately. After the meeting concluded, many of the representatives approached Blake and Grant to express personal thanks for the rescue of their people. Even Voth, who had been skeptical, acknowledged the debt the Council owed to humanity. Later, on the observation deck, Grant found Trill looking out at the stars. A historic day, Grant said, joining her. Yes, Trill agreed. The beginning of a new relationship between humans and the Council. Are you still afraid of us? Grant asked directly. Trill considered the question. I understand you better now. Humans are dangerous, yes, but not because you desire conflict. You're dangerous because your world required it for survival. She turned to face him. The Council feared what would happen if humans were unleashed. Now we know. You fight to protect, not just to conquer. On the planet below, Sergeant Diaz and her team were helping Lorian engineers repair their central communication hub. The work was going faster than expected because the humans could easily lift equipment that would have required machines for the Lorians. I still don't understand, said a young Lorian engineer working beside Diaz. Why did you come to help us? We're not human. This isn't your world. Diaz thought about it as she adjusted a heavy transmitter panel. On Earth, we have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Humans are stronger than most species because our world made us that way. Using that strength to help others just makes sense. The council called you Deathworlders, the engineer said. They meant it as a warning. Maybe it should have been a promise instead, Diaz replied. A promise that when death threatens, we'll be the ones standing in its way. As night fell on the Lorian capital, lights came back on across the city. Communication systems connected to neighboring worlds again. People emerged from hiding to begin rebuilding, and in orbit above them, the Deathworlder fleet stood watch, a new guardian for a galaxy that was finally beginning to understand. Evolution on a dangerous world hadn't made humans a threat to peace. It had made them its most powerful defenders. The large meeting hall fell silent as Ambassador Trell walked to the center. His blue skin looked pale under the bright lights. The human leaders watched him with hard eyes. Trell had come a long way to be here, traveling across half the galaxy. He was not used to Earth's heavy gravity. Each step was hard work. Leaders of Earth, Trell began, his voice shaking. I come before you today with great shame. The 50 members of the Earth Defense Council did not speak. For 200 years, the Galactic Coalition had kept humans at a distance. They traded with Earth but never fully welcomed humans into their group. They called Earth a death world, a planet so dangerous that most alien species would die there within hours. The Coalition races had evolved on gentle planets with mild weather, few predators, and stable environments. They had never needed to develop the toughness that humans had. They had never faced the constant danger that shaped human history. Our worlds are under attack, Trell continued. A new enemy has appeared at the edge of our space. We call them the Void Swarm. General Mason leaned forward. He was an older man with gray hair and a face marked by years of battle. And what exactly is this Void Swarm, Ambassador? Trell pressed a button on his wrist device. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a mass of dark, twisting shapes moving through space. As they watched, the shapes surrounded a small planet. Within minutes, the planet's surface turned black. Then it began to break apart. They consume everything, Trell said. Planets, ships, people, everything. We have lost contact with 12 colony worlds. Billions of our people are dead. What have you done to stop them? Asked Admiral Reed, a tall woman with short hair and sharp eyes. We tried to communicate with them. We sent our best diplomats, none returned. Trell's voice grew quieter. We sent our defense ships, they were destroyed easily. The Void Swarm learns from each encounter, it adapts quickly. Captain Jones, sitting beside Reed, snorted. Your defense ships are barely armed. You've spent centuries avoiding any real military development. Trell lowered his head. Yes, the Coalition has enjoyed 10,000 years of peace. We believed warfare was behind us. We were wrong. The room was quiet again. The human leaders looked at each other. They all knew why Trell was really here. Let me be direct, Ambassador, said General Mason. For 2 centuries, your coalition has treated humans like dangerous animals. You've limited our expansion into space. You've restricted our technology. You've kept us isolated because you fear what we might do. Yes, Trell admitted. And now you want our help, Mason continued. You want the dangerous animals to fight for you. Trell lifted his head and met Mason's eyes. General, my people are dying. The Coalition is facing extinction. Yes, we have feared humans. You evolved on a world that tried to kill you every day. Your bodies are stronger, your minds more aggressive, your technology more focused on warfare than any species we have ever encountered. He took a deep breath. But now we need those qualities. We need your strength. We need your warriors. We need your ships. President Lin stood up from her seat at the center of the council. What exactly are you asking for, Ambassador? Everything you can send, Trell replied. The Void Swarm will reach Earth eventually. Better to fight them in Coalition space than to wait for them to grow stronger. We offer full access to our faster-than-light technology, our star maps, our resources. In return, we ask for your military force. The council chamber erupted into discussion. Some argued that this was Earth's chance to gain power in the galaxy. Others believed it was a trap to weaken human defenses. A few suggested letting the Coalition fall. After several minutes, Admiral Reed raised her hand for silence. "Ambassador," she said, "you understand what you're asking for? If we send our fleet, we will not fight like your people do. We will not hold back. We will not look for peaceful solutions once the battle begins." "We understand," Trell said. "That is why we have come to you." General Mason stood up. "I have seen the Coalition's reports on human psychology. You call our aggression a flaw. You call our competitiveness dangerous. You fear our capacity for violence." "Yes," Trell said again. "But now we need those qualities." President Lin called for a vote. One by one, the council members pressed buttons on their desks. The result appeared on a large screen, 48 in favor, 2 against. "Very well," President Lin said. "Ambassador Trell, you will have your fleet. Earth will answer your call for help." For the first time, Trell's face showed relief. "Thank you, President. The Coalition will not forget this." "No," said Admiral Reed as she stood up. "I expect you won't." 3 days later, ships began to gather, in Earth orbit. Not the sleek, beautiful vessels of the Coalition, but heavy armored warships built for battle. The UES Thunderchild, Earth's largest battleship, led the growing fleet. Its hull was scarred from previous conflicts. Its weapon systems were designed to deliver maximum destruction. On its bridge, Admiral Reed looked at the tactical displays, showing Coalition space and the advance of the Void Swarm. "They've lost another system," Captain Jones reported, pointing to a flashing red dot. "The swarm is moving faster than expected." Reed studied the map. "They've never faced real resistance. They've never fought an enemy that fights back effectively." She turned to her officers. "Prepare the fleet for departure. All ships at combat readiness. We launch in 12 hours. As the Earth fleet made final preparations, Ambassador Trell watched from a Coalition vessel in orbit. His assistant stood beside him, watching the human ships with wide eyes. "Are they truly as dangerous as the old reports say?" the assistant asked. "More dangerous," Trell replied. "These humans come from a world where everything tries to kill them. Their bodies can withstand extreme conditions. Their minds are always ready for conflict. They have fought wars among themselves for thousands of years. Then why bring them into Coalition space? Are we not inviting an even worse danger than the Void Swarm?" Trell turned to look at his assistant. "Because the Void Swarm will show no mercy. It will consume everything. At least the humans can be reasoned with." He paused. "And if we survive this, the humans will have earned their place in the galaxy. We can no longer pretend they don't belong." The first ships began to move out of Earth orbit, engines glowing bright against the darkness of space. The Deathworlders were going to war. The main hangar of the UAS Thunderchild was huge. Hundreds of fighters and smaller ships filled the space. People moved quickly, checking weapons and loading supplies. Admiral Reed walked through the busy area, watching her crew prepare for war. "Admiral," called Captain Jones, hurrying to catch up with her. "The last transport from Earth just arrived. We now have all requested personnel on board." Reed nodded. "And the Coalition representatives?" "They're on the command deck. They seem nervous." Reed almost smiled. "They should be. They're about to see what humans can really do when we stop holding back." For 3 full days, Earth's orbital shipyards had worked non-stop. Ships that had been in reserve were brought back to active duty. Weapons that the Coalition had asked humans not to develop were installed on every vessel. The peaceful aliens had no idea what humans had kept hidden, just in case. Reed and Jones took an elevator to the command deck. When the doors opened, they found 3 Coalition aliens waiting for them. All 3 had the same blue skin as Ambassador Trell, but these were military advisors, not diplomats. "Admiral Reed," said the tallest one, named Varro. "Your fleet is impressive, but I must express concern about your battle plan." Reed walked to the main display table. It showed a 3D map of Coalition space with the Void Swarm's territory marked in red. "What concerns you, Advisor Varro?" "You plan to take the fleet directly to the Arcturus system," Varro said, pointing to a star near the edge of the red zone. "That system has already been attacked. The Coalition Council expected you to create a defensive line at the Proxima boundary. Here." He pointed to an area well away from the fighting. Captain Jones frowned. A defensive line? While the swarm continues to eat your worlds? We must protect what remains, Varro explained. The Proxima boundary has 26 inhabited worlds behind it. Reed studied the map. The void swarm doesn't stop. Your own reports show that. It consumes and moves on. A defensive line would only delay the inevitable. She moved her finger across the display, tracing a path through Coalition space. We're not here to defend, we're here to attack. The Coalition advisors looked at each other with worry. This was not what they had expected. Admiral, said another advisor named Mela, our fastest ships took measurements of the swarm's forces. They outnumber your fleet by at least 20 to 1. Numbers aren't everything in warfare, Reed replied. The swarm has never faced an enemy that fights back effectively. We will hit them hard, test their response, and adapt our strategy. This is very risky, Varro said. Reed turned to face the aliens directly. You asked for our help because your way wasn't working. Now you have to trust our way. Before the advisors could respond, an officer approached Reed. Admiral, all ships report ready for FTL jump. The fleet is assembled and awaiting your command. Reed nodded. Very good. All hands to battle stations. Prepare for departure in 30 minutes. As the officer left to relay the orders, Reed turned back to the Coalition advisors. I suggest you find secure positions. The jump can be rough for those not used to it. When the advisors had left the command deck, Captain Jones moved closer to Reed. They don't understand what they've asked for, do they? No, Reed replied quietly. They think we're going to fight like they would, just with better weapons. She looked at the map again, at all the Coalition worlds already lost to the swarm. They're about to learn how Deathworlders wage war. On the observation deck, Ambassador Trell watched the massive fleet prepare to depart. Over 300 Earthships had gathered, from small, fast attack vessels to huge battleships like the Thunderchild. All of them were armed with weapons, far beyond what the Coalition had expected. His assistant, Lero, stood beside him. I've reviewed the human battle plans, Lero said. They intend to attack the swarm directly. Yes, Trell replied. That is the human way. But it could be a disaster. Their fleet could be destroyed, and then we would have no defense at all. Trell turned to look at his young assistant. Lero, do you know why Earth is called a death world? Of course, high gravity, extreme temperatures, dangerous animals, powerful storms. Yes, but those are just facts. The real reason is that everything on Earth evolved to survive by any means necessary. The plants, the animals, even the tiny organisms, all developed special ways to stay alive in harsh conditions. Trell pointed to the fleet. Humans are the ultimate product of that world. They never stop fighting. They never give up. And they never, ever follow the expected path. You sound like you admire them, Lero said, surprised. I fear them, Trell corrected, but right now that fear gives me hope. On the bridge of the Thunderchild, Reed took her command chair. The massive view screen showed Earth growing smaller. As the fleet moved into jump position, all ships report ready for FTL jump, Admiral, reported the communications officer. Coalition advisors are secure, added another officer. Reed nodded. Very well. Send to all ships. We are the first human fleet to enter Coalition space in force. We go to fight an enemy that threatens all intelligent life. Show them what humans are capable of. She paused, then added, for Earth and the Coalition. Execute jump. The space around the fleet began to bend as the FTL drives activated. Stars stretched into lines, and then the ships vanished from Earth orbit. The jump lasted 3 hours by ship time. When the fleet emerged, they were in the Arcturus system at the edge of swarm territory. The system had been home to a Coalition mining colony with nearly 1 million inhabitants. Now the planets were dark, their surfaces covered with the black growth of the swarm. Scan complete, Admiral, reported the sensor officer. No signs of Coalition survivors. Swarm presence detected on the 3rd and 4th planets and in orbit around the gas giant. Reed studied the tactical display. They don't appear to have noticed us yet. Perfect. She turned to her communications officer. Send to all ships, deploy to attack formation Delta. Fighters prepare to launch, all weapon systems online and ready. Captain Jones moved to stand beside Reed's chair. First real contact with the swarm. How do you want to play this? Reed's eyes narrowed as she watched the swarm ships moving slowly through the system, seemingly unaware of the human fleet's arrival. Let's introduce ourselves, she said. Target the largest swarm concentration, and fire all forward batteries. Let's see how they respond to a real punch in the face. The Thunderchild's weapons officers worked quickly, locking targets and preparing the main guns. Other ships in the fleet did the same, forming a wall of firepower aimed at the heart of the swarm forces. All ships in position, Admiral, reported the tactical officer. Weapons locked and ready. Reed took a deep breath. This was the moment that would decide if the humans could truly hurt the Void Swarm. If their weapons had no effect, the fight would be over before it began. Fire, she commanded. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles launched simultaneously from the human fleet. They crossed the empty space in seconds, striking the unsuspecting swarm ships. The explosions were so bright that the bridge crew had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, a third of the swarm ships were gone, turned to floating debris. The rest began to move, turning toward the human fleet. For the first time since the Void Swarm appeared, someone had hurt them badly. Now they would respond. They're moving toward us, Admiral, reported the sensor officer. Fast. Reed smiled grimly. Good. All ships maintain positions. Launch fighters. Let's show the coalition what happens when you ask Deathworlders for help. The battle for Arcturus had begun. The Void Swarm ships moved like angry insects, speeding toward the human fleet. They were strange to look at. Part machine, part living creature. Their black, twisted shapes reminded Admiral Reed of deep-sea creatures from Earth's oceans. All fighters launched, Admiral, reported the flight controller. Attack groups Alpha through Delta are engaging the enemy. On the main screen, Reed watched as hundreds of small human fighters swarmed around the larger Void ships. The fighters were quick and agile, darting in to fire their weapons and then pulling away before the swarm could respond. They're fast, Captain Jones observed, watching the battle unfold. But look there, they're already changing their approach. Reed nodded. The swarm ships were indeed adapting, trying new formations and defense patterns. That confirms what the coalition told us. They learn quickly. Admiral, called the sensor officer, we're detecting a new wave of swarm ships entering the system, at least twice as many as the first group. Reed studied the tactical display. This was expected. The swarm would call for reinforcements. Now it was time to see if the human battle plan would work. Send to all ships, Reed ordered. Execute maneuver hammer and anvil. Battle Group 2, prepare to engage the new arrivals. The human fleet smoothly split into two major groups. The larger group continued to engage the first wave of swarm ships, while the second group moved to intercept the reinforcements. It was a classic military tactic, one that humans had used for centuries in battles on Earth. On the observation deck, the coalition advisors watched the battle with amazement. I've never seen ships move like that, Varro said, so coordinated, so aggressive. Mela nodded. Our defense fleets always try to minimize casualties. They fight defensively, protecting each other. The humans... She paused, watching as a human battleship deliberately rammed a damaged swarm vessel, destroying both. The humans seemed to accept losses as part of their strategy. They come from a world where death is always close, Trell reminded them. They understand sacrifice in a way we never had to learn. The battle raged for hours. The Void Swarm was learning, adapting to human tactics, but the humans were adapting too, changing their approach whenever the swarm seemed to understand their pattern. In the middle of the fight, a massive swarm ship, larger than any seen before, emerged from behind one of Arcturus's moons. It moved, slowly toward the center of the battle, spreading long, dark tendrils in all directions. Scan that ship, Reed ordered. What are we dealing with? Energy readings are off the charts, Admiral, replied the science officer. I believe it's a command vessel. The smaller swarm ships are changing their behavior, becoming more organized. Reed watched as the massive ship began to coordinate the swarm's attacks. Their random movements became deliberate. Their defensive patterns became stronger. It's directing them, Reed realized, like a queen in a beehive. She turned to tactical. All ships target that large vessel. Concentrate fire, I want it destroyed now. The human fleet responded immediately, turning their most powerful weapons toward the command ship. But the swarm was ready. Hundreds of smaller vessels moved to protect the large one, sacrificing themselves to absorb the human attacks. They're shielding it, Jones said. They understand its importance. Reed nodded. And that gives us something to exploit. She activated the fleet-wide communication system. This is Admiral Reed to all fighter squadrons. I need volunteers for a special mission. We need to get inside that command ship. Within minutes, 20 fighter pilots had volunteered. Their small, fast ships might be able to slip past the swarm's defenses and attack the command ship directly. We'll create an opening, Reed told them. Squadron leaders coordinate with tactical. When you see your chance, take it. The main fleet increased their attack, drawing the swarm's attention. Then at Reed's command, they executed a new maneuver, all ships firing at once toward a single point in the swarm's defensive line. The concentrated firepower blasted a hole in their formation. Now, Reed ordered. The fighter squadron shot through the gap, racing toward the command ship. The swarm reacted quickly, trying to close the hole, but it was too late. The human fighters were too fast. They're in, Jones reported, watching the tactical display. 15 fighters made it through. They're approaching the command ship. The fighters looked tiny next to the massive swarm vessel. They flew close to its surface, searching for weak points, firing their weapons at anything that looked important. The command ship began to twist and turn, trying to shake them off. Look there, Reed pointed to the display. Those look like sensor nodes. Target them. The fighters focused their attacks on the bulbous structures Reed had identified. When the first one exploded, the effect was immediate. The smaller swarm ships near that section of space suddenly moved erratically, as if confused. It's working, Jones exclaimed. The command ship controls them through those nodes. One by one, the fighters destroyed the sensor nodes. With each explosion, more of the swarm lost coordination. Some ships stopped moving entirely. Others began to fire on their own kind. The command ship seemed to realize the danger. It began to retreat, trying to move away from the battle. But the damage was done. Without its guidance, the swarm forces fell into chaos. All ships, press the attack, Reed ordered. Don't let them regroup. The human fleet surged forward, cutting through the disorganized swarm. Ships that had seemed unstoppable just hours before were now easy targets. As the battle turned decisively in humanity's favor, Reed received a communication from one of the fighter pilots still on the command ship. Admiral, we've found what looks like a central chamber. There's something different in there, not like the rest of the ship. Can you destroy it? Reed asked. Yes, ma'am, but we'll need to detonate our engines to generate enough power. We won't be coming back. Reed closed her eyes for a moment. More sacrifice. But if it meant destroying the swarm's ability to coordinate, do it, she said. And thank you. Minutes later, the center of the command ship erupted in a blinding explosion. The massive vessel broke apart, sections of it drifting away from each other. The remaining swarm ships went completely still, as if they had simply shut down. Status report, Reed demanded. Swarm vessels are inactive, Admiral, reported Tactical. No energy signatures, no movement. The fighters? Jones asked quietly. All lost, came the reply. Reed nodded, her face grim but determined. Send to all ships, secure the system. I want teams on those inactive swarm vessels. Let's find out. What makes them tick? She looked at the display showing the remains of the battle. And prepare a full report for Coalition headquarters. Tell them we've won the first round. On the observation deck, Trell and the other Coalition representatives stood in stunned silence. They had expected the humans to fight well, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. They did it, Mella whispered. They actually defeated the swarm. Yes, Trell replied. And now we must live with the consequences of bringing Deathworlders into the galaxy. He looked out at the victorious human fleet. May we never regret our decision. News of the human victory at Arcturus spread quickly through Coalition space. For the first time since the Void Swarm appeared, there was hope. The Coalition Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the battle reports. The humans destroyed over 600 swarm ships, Council Leader Pell announced to the gathered representatives. They secured the Arcturus system and are now studying the disabled swarm vessels. Ambassador Trell stood before the council, looking tired but relieved. Admiral Reed reports that the key to their success was destroying the command ship. Without central control, the swarm became disorganized and easy to defeat. Then our strategy is clear, said one council member. Find and destroy these command ships in all swarm-controlled systems. Trell nodded. That is the human plan. They are already preparing to attack the next system. In the 2 weeks following the Battle of Arcturus, the human fleet moved through 3 more systems, destroying swarm forces using the same tactics. Each time they located the command ship, targeted it, and watched as the rest of the swarm fell into chaos. On the bridge of the Thunderchild, Admiral Reed studied the tactical display with growing concern. Something's wrong, she told Captain Jones. Look at the pattern of swarm movements in the Rigel system. Jones examined the data. They're staying close to the command ship, protecting it better than before. Exactly, Reed said. They're learning. After each battle, the survivors must be reporting back to the main swarm. They're adapting to our tactics. The science team studying the captured swarm ships had made important discoveries. The swarm operated as a single mind spread across many bodies. Each ship contained a piece of the swarm's consciousness. When the command ships were destroyed, the nearby swarm vessels lost direction, but those farther away could still learn and plan. Admiral, called the communications officer. Urgent message from Battle Group 3 in the Deneb system. They're under heavy attack. The swarm is using new tactics. Reed's face grew grim. On screen, the view screen showed a chaotic battle. The swarm ships were no longer moving randomly. They were working together in coordinated groups, targeting the weakest human ships first, then moving on to the stronger ones. They're using our own tactics against us, Jones said quietly. Send reinforcements to Deneb immediately, Reed ordered, and contact all fleet commanders. We need to change our approach before the next major engagement. But the Void Swarm was adapting faster than expected. 3 days later, a massive swarm force launched a surprise attack on the human supply lines. 5 transport ships were destroyed before the military escorts could respond. In an emergency meeting on the Thunderchild, Reed addressed her senior officers. The swarm has studied us, she said bluntly. They've copied our basic tactics and are now using them against us. We need something they won't expect. Captain Jones looked at the battle reports. We've lost 18 ships in the last week. And at this rate, we won't have enough forces to continue pushing into swarm territory. Reed nodded. Which is why we need a new strategy. Something the swarm can't predict, because it doesn't think like us. She turned to the tactical display. I'm calling it Operation Wounded Animal. The plan was risky. Instead of attacking in force, the human fleet would appear to be retreating. Damaged ships would be left behind, sending distress signals. When the swarm moved in to destroy these seemingly easy targets, the main fleet would spring the trap. We need to make it look real, Reed told her officers. The swarm is smart enough now to suspect a trick. We need to convince them that we're actually running scared. For the next 10 days, the human fleet executed a series of apparent defeats. They retreated from system to system, always leaving behind a few ships that appeared to be crippled. The swarm pursued, growing bolder with each victory. On the Coalition homeworld, the Council watched these developments with growing alarm. The humans are losing, Council Leader Pell said. We should never have trusted them to defeat the swarm. Ambassador Trell wasn't so sure. Admiral Reed reports that everything is going according to plan. She asked that we prepare our defense forces for a major operation in the Tau Ceti system. What's in Tau Ceti? Asked another council member. Nothing, Trell replied. It's an empty system with a dying star. The humans want us to position our remaining ships there and wait. The council was skeptical. But they had little choice. The Coalition's own military forces had been devastated in the early days of the swarm invasion. If the humans failed, there would be no one left to protect their core worlds. Meanwhile, the Void Swarm had grown confident. They had pushed the human fleet back across 12 systems, destroying many ships. They believed they had learned how the humans fought and how to counter them. What they didn't realize was that Reed had been carefully tracking which swarm ships survived each engagement. She noted how they communicated, how they learned, and most importantly, how they shared that knowledge with the rest of the swarm. They use light-based signals, she explained to her officers. When they can't directly connect to a command ship, they send pulses of energy to relay information, and that's their weakness. The trap was set in the Tau Ceti system. The remaining human fleet gathered behind the system's outer planet, appearing to make a last stand. The few coalition ships positioned themselves nearby, looking like a final line of defense. When the swarm arrived, they found what seemed to be the perfect opportunity to finish off their enemies. Thousands of swarm ships moved into the system, including 3 massive command vessels. They took the bait, Jones said, watching on the tactical display. All swarm forces are in position. Reed nodded. Send the signal. Throughout the Tau Ceti system, hundreds of small devices activated. The humans had placed them weeks earlier during their apparent retreat. These devices began to emit powerful, electromagnetic pulses designed to match the frequency of the swarm's communication signals. The effect was immediate and devastating. The false signals flooded the swarm network with conflicting commands. Ships began to move in random directions. Some fired on their own kind. The command vessels, overwhelmed with corrupted data, couldn't regain control. Now, Reed ordered. All ships attack. Target the command vessels first. The human fleet emerged from hiding, weapons blazing. The coalition ships joined them, following the human attack pattern. Caught in confusion and unable to coordinate, the swarm forces were easy targets. Within hours, the battle was over. The largest swarm fleet assembled since the invasion began had been destroyed. All 3 command vessels were gone, leaving the remaining swarm ships drifting aimlessly. On the bridge of the Thunderchild, Admiral Reed allowed herself a small smile. Send to all ships. Well done. Secure the system and prepare for the next phase. Captain Jones studied the tactical display, now showing mostly friendly icons. You think they'll fall for this trick again? No, Reed replied. The swarm will adapt, they always do. But now we know how they think, how they learn. She looked at the data from the battle. And most importantly, we know they're not invincible. On Dio, the Coalition homeworld, the Council watched the battle reports with amazement. They tricked the swarm, Pell said. Made them think they were winning, then trapped them. Trell nodded. That is what makes humans so dangerous and so valuable. On their death world, they learn to hunt creatures much larger and stronger than themselves. They understand how to use deception as a weapon. And what happens when this war is over? Asked another council member. What happens when the Deathworlders no longer have the swarm to fight? Trell had no answer. That was a problem for another day. For now, they needed the humans and their deadly skills. The Void Swarm had been wounded, but not defeated. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Tau Ceti, Admiral Reed stood on the bridge of the Thunderchild. The ship no longer looked new and powerful. Its hull was scarred from countless battles. Many systems were barely working. The crew was tired, but their eyes showed pride. They had fought the Void Swarm across 50 star systems and pushed them back each time. Admiral, Captain Jones reported, the last swarm command ship has been located. It's hiding in the asteroid belt of the Vega system. Reed studied the tactical display. The final command ship was massive, larger than any they had encountered before. Around it were the remaining swarm vessels, perhaps 1,000 in total. A small number compared to the tens of thousands that had once threatened the Coalition, but still dangerous. This is it, Reed said. The final battle. The war had changed both sides. The humans had learned to respect the swarm's ability to adapt. The swarm had learned to fear human unpredictability. and the coalition had learned what it meant to fight for survival. In the past 6 months, the coalition races had begun to change. Watching the humans fight, they started to understand the value of aggression and sacrifice in warfare. Some coalition ships now fought alongside human vessels, using tactics they would have found unthinkable before the war. "The coalition forces are in position," Jones reported. "They're awaiting our signal to attack." Reed nodded. "Let's finish this. All ships, prepare for the final assault." The combined human and coalition fleet moved toward the Vega system. They had developed new weapons specifically designed to fight the swarm: electromagnetic pulse generators that disrupted swarm communications, guided missiles that could track and destroy the weak points in swarm ships, and special fighters that could cut through swarm defenses. The swarm knew they were coming. They had prepared their final defense around the command ship, using everything they had learned from fighting the humans. "They've mined the approach," reported the tactical officer as the fleet entered the Vega system. "And they have ships hiding behind the larger asteroids." "Just as we expected," Reed replied. "Deploy the minesweepers, fighter groups Alpha through Delta. Clear those asteroids." The battle began slowly, with small engagements throughout the asteroid belt. Both sides were being careful, testing each other's defenses. After 3 hours of fighting, the human fleet had cleared a path to the central area where the command ship waited. "All ships, form up for the final attack," Reed ordered. "Coalition vessels, take your assigned positions. Remember the plan." The plan was simple but dangerous. The human ships would attack the command ship directly, drawing the attention of the swarm defenders. Meanwhile, the coalition ships would use their newly developed weapons to cut off the command ship's communication with the rest of the swarm. "Attack. Formation ready, Admiral," Jones reported. Reed took a deep breath. "All ships advance." The human fleet moved forward as one, weapons firing at the swarm defenders. The coalition ships followed, staying behind the human vessels for protection. The battle quickly became intense, with ships on both sides taking heavy damage. "We're getting close to the command ship," reported the tactical officer. "But our losses are mounting." Reed watched as another human destroyer exploded under swarm fire. "Stay on course. We need to get the coalition ships within range." After 20 minutes of heavy fighting, the fleet was close enough. "Coalition ships now," Reed ordered. The coalition vessels activated their special weapons, devices designed to mimic and disrupt the swarm's communication signals. The effect was immediate. Many of the swarm ships stopped moving or began firing in random directions. "It's working," Jones exclaimed. "The swarm defenses are breaking down." "All ships target the command ship," Reed ordered. "Everything we've got." The combined fleet focused their fire on the massive command vessel. Despite its size and the remaining defenses, it couldn't withstand the concentrated attack. Explosions blossomed across its surface as weapons found weak points in its armor. "We're detecting unusual energy readings from the command ship," reported the science officer. "It appears to be building towards some kind of overload." Reed realized what was happening. "It's going to self-destruct. All ships pull back. Maximum distance now." The fleet began to retreat, but they were too close. When the command ship exploded, the blast wave hit them hard. The Thunderchild shook violently, throwing crew members to the floor. Emergency alarms sounded throughout the ship. "Damage report," Reed demanded once the shaking stopped. "Multiple hull breaches," reported the damage control officer. "Engines at 60%. Weapon systems offline. But we're still flying." Reed checked the tactical display. Many ships, both human and coalition, had been damaged by the explosion, but they had survived. And more importantly, the remaining swarm vessels were now completely inactive. "Send to all ships," Reed said. "Status report." The reports came in, one by one. 15 human ships destroyed, 12 coalition vessels lost, many more damaged. But the swarm had been defeated. The last command ship was gone, and with it, the threat to the galaxy. 3 weeks later, Admiral Reed stood in the grand meeting hall of the Coalition Council. She wore her formal uniform, now decorated with new medals. Captain Jones stood beside her, along with other key officers from the fleet. "The Void Swarm has been eliminated," Reed reported to the assembled council. All systems previously under swarm control have been secured. There is no indication of any remaining organized swarm presence. Council Leader Pell nodded. The Coalition owes humanity a debt we can never fully repay. You saved our civilization from extinction. We fought together, Reed replied diplomatically. Humans and Coalition forces side by side. Yes, Pell agreed, and that is something we must discuss. He looked around at the other council members. The war has changed us all. The Coalition races have learned much from humans, about fighting, about sacrifice, about the will to survive at any cost. Ambassador Trell stepped forward. The Council has prepared a formal treaty. We would like to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Coalition, with all rights and privileges. Reed was surprised. Before the war, the Coalition had kept humans isolated, afraid of their violent nature. Now they were offering to welcome them as equals. There's more, Trell continued. The Council proposes the creation of a new defense force, one that combines Coalition technology with human military expertise. A force that can protect all our worlds from any future threats. Reed understood what was happening. The Coalition had seen what humans could do in war. Now they wanted that power on their side permanently. I will convey your offer to Earth, she said. But I should warn you, humans make demanding allies. We will expect true equality, not second-class status. Of course, Pell replied. The war has taught us that we need the Deathworlders. Your unique perspective has proven invaluable. Later, as Reed and her officers prepared to return to the fleet, Trell approached her privately. You understand what's really happening, don't you, Admiral? He asked. Reed nodded. The Coalition is afraid of us now. You saw what we can do in battle. You'd rather have us as allies than potential enemies. Yes, Trell admitted. Before, we feared what humans might become if they spread through the galaxy. Now we fear what might happen if you decide the Coalition is a threat. Reed looked at the alien ambassador. Is that why you want this joint defense force, to keep an eye on us? Partly, Trell said honestly, but also because we truly need you. The galaxy is a dangerous place. The Void Swarm may not be the last threat we face. Reed thought about Earth, about the harsh world that had shaped humanity into warriors. Perhaps that was their role in the galaxy. Protectors of the gentler races who had never needed to develop the same fighting spirit. Tell your council we accept the partnership, she said. But remember, you invited the Deathworlders into your home. Don't be surprised when we act like Deathworlders. Trell smiled, showing he understood. The peace we build together may not always be comfortable, Admiral. But after facing extinction, we'll gladly accept a terrible peace over no peace at all. As Reed walked away, she knew that humanity's place in the galaxy had forever changed. The aliens had begged for help, and the Deathworlders had sent a fleet. Now they all had to live with the consequences of that decision, for better or worse. The end.